He sat alone at the back of the school hallway, holding an old thin notebook that looked like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Every page inside was filled with lines of music he wrote by hand, but nobody around him cared enough to look. To most students, he was just the quiet boy who never talked much and never tried to get attention. Most mornings felt the same for him. He walked into school with slow steps, trying not to bump into anyone. He kept his eyes down, hoping he could move through the hallway without anyone noticing him. But students always noticed. They noticed not because they cared, but because they enjoyed having someone easy to laugh at. Sometimes they laughed at his shoes, which were old and scuffed. Sometimes they laughed at his hair, which he tried to fix each morning but never looked the way he wanted. But mostly, they laughed at his love for the old school piano tucked away in a dusty music room that almost no one visited. They called it that old thing, and whenever they saw him carrying his notebook, someone would whisper the words with a smirk. He heard it every day, yet he never said anything back. He wasn't the type to argue. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just kept walking with his notebook pressed close to his chest. During lunch breaks, when most students talked loudly or played games, he slipped away to the music room. The room smelled like old wood and chalk. Sunlight came through the windows in soft yellow lines. The piano sat in the corner like a forgotten friend. Its paint was chipped, and the keys were a little uneven. But he still loved it because it was the only place where he didn't feel judged. He would sit on the wooden bench, open his notebook, and place his fingers gently on the keys. He didn't always play full songs. Sometimes he just played a few notes that matched how he felt inside. Gentle notes when he felt hopeful, shaky notes when he felt sad, stronger ones when he wanted to believe he mattered in some way. In the music room, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel laughed at. He felt like someone who could breathe. But outside the music room, the world felt cold. Some students saw him walking toward the music room one day and started teasing him again. "There he goes, going to talk to his old piano," one kid said. The others laughed. He kept walking. But a small part of him wished he could disappear for a moment. Not forever, just long enough to not hear their voices. Even teachers didn't notice what he carried inside him. They saw a quiet boy who did his homework and didn't cause trouble. But they didn't see the hours he spent at home trying to write melodies on cheap paper. They didn't see him staying awake at night imagining what it would feel like if someone finally listened. At home, life wasn't easy. His family didn't have much. But they had love. His parent worked long hours, and he tried not to worry them with his school problems. When he got home, he would sit at a small table in the living room and copy music notes into his notebook. The room would be quiet except for the soft scratching of his pencil. Those moments made him feel calm, made him believe that maybe one day someone would understand why music meant everything to him. But mornings always brought the same challenge. He walked into school again and again, trying to stay invisible. The teasing didn't stop. The whispers didn't stop. The jokes didn't stop. And yet, he never stopped walking to the music room during lunch. He never stopped writing in his notebook. He never stopped playing that old piano. It wasn't confidence that kept him going. It was something different, something gentle but firm inside him. A small voice that kept telling him, "Just play." It didn't matter if no one else believed in him, as long as he kept believing in the music he heard in his head. One day, a group of students peeked into the music room while he was playing. They didn't recognize the tune, but they recognized the boy sitting alone at the piano. Someone whispered, "He is seriously still playing that old thing." They laughed. And he heard it. His fingers froze for a second. The sound of their laughter stung, but he didn't turn around. He didn't want them to see his face. He took a slow breath and let his fingers touch the keys again. The melody he played became a little softer, a little shakier, but he kept going, because stopping felt worse than being laughed at. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this small moment inside a dusty room with a broken piano, was the beginning of something he never expected. The world outside saw him as the boy everyone laughed at. But soon, that same world would sit in silence, would listen. and would feel his music in a way they could never forget. For now, though, he just played, alone in a room where his dreams were the only things cheering for him. He walked into school the next day, hoping it would be quiet for once. But the moment he stepped through the doors, the whispers began again. Students in small groups looked at him, and then at each other, and the same joke passed between them. "Play that old thing," they said. It with a grin, as if it was the funniest line in the world, and he felt that familiar weight grow in his chest, held his notebook close to him while moving through the noisy hallway. His steps were slow but steady. He did not want to show fear. But his hands still tightened on the notebook, as if holding it would protect him. He kept his eyes lowered and hoped today would be different, but the voices around him only grew louder during class. He sat in the back. As always, he tried to listen to the teacher, but the soft laughing a few desks away kept pulling his attention. Someone in the room tapped on their desk, pretending to play piano keys. Students around them laughed quietly. The tapping grew faster and louder, and he knew they were doing it for him. He did not respond. He only stared at his notebook, as if it could shield him from the noise. At lunch, he walked to the cafeteria, but turned away when he heard a group of students talking. "The piano boy is back," one voice said. Another replied, "Bet he will run to that dusty room again." Everyone laughed. He turned toward the hallway and walked away. He did not want to hear more. He reached the music room and placed his hand on the door before opening it. Inside the room, the air felt still, almost peaceful. It was the one space where he could breathe. He moved toward the old piano and touched the keys lightly. He expected to feel calm, but his hands trembled. The teasing had followed him all morning, and even the quiet room could not erase. He sat down and took out his notebook, hoping that playing would help his heart settle. He closed his eyes for a moment and let the silence wrap around him. Then he started to play soft, slow notes, filling the room with gentle sound. He tried to lose himself in the music, but every few moments he remembered the voices from the hallway echoing in his mind. While he played, he heard footsteps outside. The sound made him freeze. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then someone laughed. A few others joined in. He felt his shoulders drop as the voices drifted through the room. They were not even trying to hide that they were teasing him again. "Look at him trying so hard," one voice said. Another voice added, "Why bother? It is just an old piano." The group laughed again and then walked away, leaving their words behind like a shadow. He waited until the hallway became quiet again before he let himself breathe. He placed his fingers back on the keys, but the music did not sound the same anymore. The notes felt heavier, as if they carried every word he heard that day. Later that afternoon, he tried to sit alone outside beneath a tree, but the laughter followed him again. A boy walked past and made pretend piano motions in the air. His friends laughed loudly, as if it was the best joke of the day. He wanted to ignore them, but each laugh felt sharper than the last. He wondered why his love for something so simple bothered so many people. He was not hurting anyone. He was not trying to be special. He simply loved the sound of the piano. He loved how the keys felt under his fingers. He loved how playing made the world feel softer for a moment. But nobody else understood that, and he did not know how to make them understand. As the day ended, he walked home with slow steps. He kept replaying the voices in his head. The jokes felt louder each time. He remembered them, but so did the quiet little voice inside him that said, "Keep going." He did not know why that voice stayed with him, but it gave him just enough strength to not give up. When he got home, he opened his notebook again and added a few new lines of music. The room was silent, the evening air gentle, his pencil moving slowly across the page. He felt a little calmer now, and the weight in his chest eased a bit. The mockery grew louder every day, but so did something inside him, something steady, something quiet. Something that refused to break. He did not know it yet, but that quiet strength would soon be the thing that turned an entire room silent. The next morning, he walked into school feeling tired from the long night of writing music. He had stayed awake longer than he planned, adding new lines to a melody that he hoped might sound right on the old piano. He carried his notebook tightly as he moved through the hallway, filled with chatter and laughs that always seemed to rise when he appeared. He tried to ignore everything around him and head straight to his first class, but the music teacher stepped out of her room at the same moment. She noticed the notebook in his hand. Her eyes softened a little, and she asked if he was heading to the music room during lunch again. He nodded, quietly surprised that she even remembered. She told him she had heard someone practicing a few days ago in the afternoon. She said the sound coming from the music room had made her stop in the hallway. She asked gently if it was him playing. He hesitated, then nodded again, unsure of what she might say next. Instead of questioning him, she smiled and said she wanted to hear him play properly one day. He felt his heart jump slightly. He was not used to praise, and he could not tell if she truly meant it or was just being kind. But the way she spoke felt sincere and different from the voices he usually heard around the school. At lunch he walked to the music room as always, but today something felt different. He closed the door behind him, and the familiar quiet wrapped around him. He opened his notebook to the new melody he had written the night before. The notes looked uneven, but they felt honest, like small pieces of who he was. Took a seat on the worn piano bench and placed his fingers on the keys. He let out a slow breath and started to play. The melody began soft, almost shy, then slowly grew as he added each new line he had written. He forgot about the teasing. He forgot about the looks. He forgot about everything outside the room. For those moments, it was just him and the music. What he did not know was that the music teacher had walked down the hall again during that same moment. She heard the sound drifting from the room and stopped outside the door. Her breath caught slightly as she listened. The melody flowed with emotion that felt far too deep for a boy his age. She felt something shift inside her and knew she had discovered a kind of talent that did not come from lessons but from life itself. She opened the door a little and watched him play. He did not see her, but she saw everything: the way his shoulders relaxed, the way his fingers moved as if each note meant something personal. She could tell he was not just practicing. He was speaking through the piano in a language only the heart could understand. When the melody ended, he lifted his hands and looked down at the keys, as if unsure whether the song was good enough. The teacher stepped inside gently. He startled a little, then looked up with nervous eyes. She told him that what she heard was not normal school-level playing. She said it felt real, honest, and incredibly moving. He did not know how to respond. He lowered his eyes because he was not used to hearing kind words from anyone. She asked if he would consider performing at the school talent show. He felt his stomach tighten. He had never thought of playing in front of people who only laughed at him. But the teacher explained that his music deserved to be heard. She believed in him, even if he did not fully believe in himself. Yet he said he needed time to think, and she agreed, telling him the door was always open if he wanted help. She left the room quietly, but her mind was already made up. She knew the school had no idea what kind of gift he carried, and she wanted others to hear it too. After school, he walked home slowly. The idea of playing in front of the entire school scared him, but a small spark inside him wondered what it would feel like if even one person listened without judging, even one person hearing him the way the teacher did. That night he sat with his notebook again. He looked at his handwritten notes and realized they were more than marks on paper. They were pieces of himself. His doubts, his hope, his loneliness, his dreams. He began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, his music had the power to make people hear something they had never heard from him before. For the first time he allowed the thought that his talent might be something bigger than even he understood. The day of the talent show arrived faster than he expected, and his heart felt heavier with each passing hour. The school building that usually felt loud and unfriendly now felt even bigger as he walked through the halls carrying his old notebook. His hands shook a little, but he kept telling himself to breathe and stay calm. Students rushed around him, talking, laughing, and getting ready for their own acts. But every now and then, someone pointed toward him. Whispering followed him the same way it always did, but this time the words carried something new. They wondered what he was going to play. They joked about the old piano again, and someone said the show would slow down when he came on stage, reached the backstage area, and stood in a corner, trying not to be seen. The lights above felt warm, and the air was filled with excitement from other performers. A few students practiced dance steps. A pair of friends tuned their guitars. One student adjusted the microphone while humming, but he kept his eyes on his notebook, hoping it would stop his hands from shaking. The music teacher found him and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. She told him he would do well. She reminded him why she chose him. She said his music had a heart that people needed to hear. Her voice felt calm, steady, and real. It gave him a moment of strength he did not know he had. When the show started, he watched from behind the curtain. The crowd filled the auditorium. The stage lights glowed softly. Students clapped for each performance. Some acts were funny, some were loud, some were colorful. He tried to focus on them, but his mind kept drifting to the old piano on stage, and how many eyes would be watching when he sat down as more performances passed. His turn drew closer. His heartbeat grew faster. His palms felt cold. He wondered if he should walk away. He wondered if anyone would even care if he quit. But then he remembered the hours he spent alone in the music room, the way the piano made him feel heard even when no one listened. He realized that if he walked away now, he might never know what his music could do. The teacher gave him a small nod when it was time. His knees felt weak as he walked toward the stage. A few students backstage whispered something about him, but he kept moving, trying not to hear them. When he stepped into the lights, the bright glow made the stage look huge. He could not see the faces in the audience, only shadows and shapes staring back at him. A soft laugh rose from somewhere in the crowd. Someone whispered, "There, he is playing that old thing." He heard it even from the stage, and for a moment his hands froze, but he forced himself to walk to the piano. His notebook felt heavier than ever, and he placed it gently on the music stand. He sat down slowly, letting his fingers rest on the keys. The bench creaked a little. The piano felt worn but familiar, like an old friend waiting patiently. He closed his eyes, hoping the noise from the crowd would fade. He took one deep, quiet breath, and suddenly he felt the same calm he felt in the empty music room when he opened his eyes again. He was no longer thinking about the students who laughed. He was thinking about the melody he wrote, the one that carried every feeling he had kept hidden, the one that made the teacher stop and listen, the one that made him believe he had something worth sharing. He pressed the first key. The sound echoed through the hall, soft and gentle. The whispers died down. He continued playing, letting each note flow naturally, letting the music speak for him. The stage lights warmed his face, but his mind was somewhere else, somewhere quiet and hopeful. Melody grew stronger with each passing moment. Each note carried a piece of him, a small truth he had never spoken out loud, his fears, his dreams, his pain, his hope. The audience did not know all these details, but they could feel something different, something honest. For the first time in his life, the room full of people was not laughing, not whispering, not mocking. They were listening, truly listening. He played as if the piano was the only thing in the world, as if the music was the only way he could tell his story, and with every note, the auditorium grew quieter, softer, and almost breathless. This was the moment that would change everything, though he did not know it yet. The quiet boy, the boy everyone laughed at, was about to show them all something they never expected. First few notes floated into the auditorium like a soft breath, and the crowd fell silent in a way no one expected. The students who had whispered about him earlier stopped mid-sentence. The teachers leaned forward without meaning to. Even the ones who barely noticed him in class felt something shift inside as the sound spread across the room. He kept his eyes on the keys, letting the melody guide him. The music felt alive under his fingertips. Every note carried a small piece of his story, though he never said a word about it to anyone. The sadness he kept hidden, the quiet strength he held onto, the long nights he spent writing by the dim light of his small living room. All of it found its place in the music. The audience did not know any details. They did not know his struggles or his worries or the hours he spent trying to make each note feel right. but they could feel the honesty in every sound. It was simple, real, and unfiltered, and it touched people more deeply than he ever knew music could. A girl in the front row felt her throat tighten. She thought the music sounded like someone trying to hold on to hope even when the world felt heavy. Another student turned his face slightly away, trying to blink back tears, because he did not want his friends to see him cry. A teacher placed a hand over her heart, surprised at how emotional she felt over a melody written by a boy she had barely spoken to before. As he played, the music grew warm and full, like a gentle embrace. He remembered the moments in the music room when he played to feel less alone. He remembered the teasing and how the jokes echoed in his chest. He remembered walking home with his head down, trying to shut out the noise. All those memories flowed into the piano, turning into something beautiful, something that connected with every person listening. He did not look up at the audience. He was afraid it might break the spell or make him nervous again. Instead, he let the music rise and fall like waves guided by the feelings. He kept locked away for so long. The melody swelled softly, then dropped into a quiet whisper, then swelled again like someone gathering courage. Some students who had laughed at him earlier felt their faces warm with guilt. They realized they never gave him a chance. They only saw a quiet boy with an old notebook and an old piano. They never thought he could create something that would make them forget where they were, even for a moment. Even the students backstage stopped talking. They gathered near the curtain, listening with wide eyes. One of them whispered that it sounded like the kind of music you hear in a movie. Another said it felt like it was telling a story, even though there were no words. Everyone backstage felt it too, something deep, something true. The principal, seated near the center, felt his eyes sting slightly. He had watched many talent shows over the years, but he knew instantly that this performance was different. It had nothing to do with fancy skills or flashy moves. It was the feeling behind the music that made it unforgettable. He reached the middle part of the song where the melody softened until it felt like a quiet confession. The room stayed completely still, as if no one dared to breathe. The music touched something in every person. There's something they did not expect to feel. During a school talent show, he poured everything he held inside into the final part of the piece. The last section rose gently like a sunrise after a long night, offering warmth and comfort to whoever heard it. His hands moved slowly, carefully, making sure every sound carried the truth he had never been able to say out loud. As the final note lingered in the air, he lifted his fingers from the keys. His heart pounded in his chest and his breath felt shaky. But the room remained silent. He could not see the audience well from the lights, but he could feel something powerful, something he never imagined. For a moment he wondered if he had made a mistake. He wondered if the silence meant they did not like it. But then someone in the front row exhaled softly, as if they had been holding their breath the whole time. The silence was not rejection, it was awe. He had captured their hearts without saying a single word. The final note faded through the auditorium like a gentle echo, and for a long breath no one moved. The quiet felt unreal, almost too heavy for a school talent show. The boy sat frozen at the piano, unsure if he should stand or wait or hide. He kept his hand still on his lap, trying to steady his breath while the bright stage lights warmed his face. Then slowly something unexpected happened. A soft sound came from the front row, a small shaky inhale. A girl lifted her hand to wipe her eyes, trying to hide it, but failing. Another student beside her lowered his head because tears were sliding down his cheeks and he did not want anyone to notice. A few rows back, someone covered their mouth with both hands, because they had not felt this emotional in years. The quiet boy had made them all feel something, and none of them were ready for. I still had not looked up. His gaze stayed on the old piano, as if he needed a moment to come back to the real world. His heart thumped loudly, his breath trembled, and he did not understand what was going on. He was sure they would laugh or whisper or joke again. But the silence told him this moment was different from every moment before. A teacher sitting near the aisle finally exhaled deeply. She wiped the corner of her eye and whispered to the person beside her that she Had never heard anything like that from a student. The principal shifted in his seat, trying to blink away. The wetness that gathered in his eyes. He was a man known for being strict and serious. Yet even he could not stop the feeling that settled. Inside his chest, behind the curtain where students waited for their turn, the atmosphere had changed too. The noisy backstage area had gone silent. The students who once joked about him stood still now, listening to the fading echo in the auditorium. One of them whispered that they never knew he could play like that. Another said the music made him think about things he never told anyone. Every person in the building felt something warm, something deep, something they did not expect from the quiet. Boy, they barely noticed in the hallways a group of students sitting near the middle row exchanged glances. One of them had laughed at him earlier when he walked on stage. Now that same student stared at the floor with guilt soaking into his heart. He remembered the comments he made, the teasing, the mocking, the way he had joined others just because it was easy. Now he felt small, ashamed, and surprised by how wrong he had been. When the boy finally gathered enough courage to lift his eyes, he looked at the audience with nervous hesitation. He expected confusion or blank stares. Instead, he saw stillness. He saw hands covering faces. He saw heads bowed. He saw teachers wiping their eyes. He could not understand it fully, but he felt something shift inside him, a mix of disbelief and relief and fear all at once. Someone in the back row started clapping. It was soft at first, unsure. Then another person joined, then another. Soon the sound grew louder, not fast, not wild, but slow, gentle, and meaningful. The applause rolled through the room like a wave, not because they were excited, but because they were overwhelmed. He sat there stunned, watching the hands come together in a rhythm that felt like acceptance. He had never imagined he would see something like this, not from this school, not from these people, not from anyone in his life. The teacher who believed in him stepped closer to the stage from the side. Her eyes were bright with emotion. She wanted to walk up and tell him how proud she was, but she waited, letting him have his moment, letting the applause reach him fully, so he could understand that this was real. Students who once mocked him looked down, embarrassed by their own voices from the past. They knew now that the boy they teased had something they never saw, something rare, something honest and powerful. He slowly stood from the bench, unsure if his legs would hold him. His knees shook slightly, but the applause kept growing, supporting him like invisible hands lifting him up. He gave a small, uncertain nod. Not a big smile, not a confident pose, just a soft, shy gesture, and somehow that made the crowd clap even louder. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, not for what he wore, not for what he lacked, not for what they joked about, but for who he truly was, a boy with music inside him. Boy whose heart finally reached theirs. When the applause finally softened, he stepped away from the piano with slow, unsure movements. His heart still raced as he walked toward the side of the stage. His hands felt cold, his legs shaky, and he kept wondering if everything that just happened was real. He had never imagined that anyone in this school would clap for him like that. He had never imagined that his music could make people cry backstage. The students who had waited for their turn stood in a small, quiet line. None of them laughed anymore. None of them made jokes about the old piano. A few of them looked at him with wide eyes, as if seeing him for the first time. One of them moved aside to make space for him in a gentle way, something no one had done before. He held his notebook tightly against his chest, unsure of what to say or what to feel. A girl who had once teased him about the notebook stepped forward. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then finally whispered that his music was beautiful. He blinked at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. She repeated it softly, her voice warm and honest. He nodded, not knowing how to respond, because he had never received a compliment like that from a classmate. When he walked out into the hallway after the show, the crowd from the auditorium slowly trickled out. Students surrounded the entrance, their faces still touched with emotion. When they saw him, a few stepped back to give him space, but they did not turn away. Some smiled hesitantly, as if they were afraid he might not believe them. A boy who used to joke the loudest approached him with slow steps. His face looked different, now serious and almost ashamed. He told the quiet boy that he was sorry for making fun of him. He said he never knew someone at their school had that kind of talent. He explained that he thought playing piano was boring until he heard that performance. His voice shook a little and he kept his eyes on the floor. The boy listened quietly, unsure what to do with an apology. He never thought he would hear another student approach this time. Someone who had laughed at him that same morning. She said the music felt like a story, and that she could not stop thinking about it. She apologized too, saying she wished she had never joined in with the teasing. She told him she always assumed he wanted to be left alone, but now she realized he was carrying something special, something meaningful. More students gathered, and one after another they offered small words of regret, simple phrases of admiration, and soft acknowledgments of how wrong they had been. Some patted his shoulder, some offered shy smiles, some simply nodded with quiet respect. The hallway had never felt like this before, not for him, not for someone who spent most days trying to stay invisible. Teachers walked by as well. Several stopped to congratulate him. One said she had goosebumps during the performance. Another said the music reminded her of calm mornings when the world felt peaceful. The principal stopped too, praising the courage it took to perform in front of the whole school. He told the boy that his performance had changed the atmosphere of the entire event and maybe even the school itself. The boy felt overwhelmed by all the voices around him. He tried to hold on to every word, but it felt like too much. He had spent so many days hearing jokes whispered behind his back that he did not know how to absorb the kindness now offered to him. It felt like stepping out of a long shadow into warm sunlight. For the very first time he whispered a thank you here and there, his voice quiet but sincere, his heart felt full yet fragile, like he might break if he moved too fast. He held his notebook tighter as if it was the only thing keeping him grounded. A few moments later, the music teacher approached him with gentle eyes. She told him she was proud of him and that this was just the beginning. She said she wanted to help him grow his talent and show him new possibilities. He almost teared up at her words, the warmth in them reaching deeper than anything he had ever heard before. When he finally walked outside the school building, the air felt fresh and cool. The sky held soft evening colors, and for the first time in a very long time he felt light. He had faced the crowd, the teasing, the doubts, and the fear, and somehow turned it into something beautiful. He never asked for apologies, but they came because the music had spoken for him in a way his voice never could. And now the world around him saw him not as the boy they laughed at, but as someone worth listening to. The sky was turning a soft shade of gold when he reached home that evening, and he walked inside with the same old notebook pressed gently against his chest. His parent looked at him with tired eyes, expecting a regular school day story. But the moment they saw his face, they paused. Something felt different about him. He stood taller, he looked lighter, and there was a quiet glow around him that had never been there before. He sat at the small table and slowly told them what happened. He explained how he played at the talent show, how the room fell silent, how some students cried, and how people actually clapped for him. His parent listened with a hand over their mouth, overwhelmed with pride. They pulled him into a warm hug, holding him close as if they finally saw the weight he had carried all this time. The boy felt safe in that moment, safe in a way he had not felt in years. That night he placed his notebook on his bed and opened it carefully. The pages were worn and bent, and the pencil marks looked messy, but now they felt different. The messy notes were no longer just scribbles. They were pieces of his journey, tiny moments that led to something he never believed could happen. He traced a line of music with his fingertips softly, as if thanking it for staying with him through every hard day. The next morning, when he walked into school, the hallway felt new. Students looked at him with respect instead of amusement. A few smiled in a friendly way, others stepped aside to let him pass. Someone even waved shyly as if hoping for a small connection. The whispers were still there, but they carried a different tone now, softer, warmer, filled with admiration instead of mockery. Went to the music room during lunch as usual, but this time when he opened the door, he heard footsteps behind him. Several students peeked inside. asking if they could listen to him play again. He hesitated, unsure if he was ready for an audience, but their faces looked honest and hopeful. He nodded quietly and sat at the piano again. This time he was not alone, and he realized that made the room feel even brighter. He played a simple tune, not as emotional as his performance, but warm and steady. The students sat on the floor, listening with calm expressions. No laughter, no jokes, only quiet, gentle attention. When the melody ended, they clapped softly and thanked him. He felt something warm bloom in his chest, something fragile but beautiful. The music teacher later met him and told him that people from a local arts program had seen a recording of the performance. A parent in the audience had filmed it and shared it online. The video was spreading quietly, and the arts group wanted to meet him. She told him they believed he had a rare gift, and they wanted to help him learn even more. He felt his breath catch in surprise. He never imagined something like that was possible for someone like him, someone who had spent so many days wishing he could disappear. But the world suddenly felt bigger and brighter, offering opportunities he had never dared to dream of. Over the next few days, teachers invited him to play small pieces for different classes. Students asked him questions about how he wrote music. Some wanted to learn how to play a few notes on the piano. He answered them with shy smiles, trying his best to help, even though talking to big groups still made him nervous. One afternoon, he sat by himself under a tree near the schoolyard, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves. A few students walked by, and one of them said he was lucky to have such talent. He shook his head quietly because it did not feel like luck. It felt like years of being alone with his notebook, years of trying to make sense of the world through sounds instead of words. His life did not become perfect. Some days were still hard, some students still whispered out of habit, some worries still followed him home. But now he had something stronger than doubt. He had proof that his voice mattered, even if he did not speak it out loud through words. His music was enough. His story was enough. He was enough. On the last day of the week, he walked past the old piano in the auditorium and smiled. It was still worn, still uneven, still chipped in places, but now it looked different to him. It was no longer just an old instrument hidden in a dusty room. It was the doorway that led him out of the shadows and into a world where people finally listened. Placed his hand gently on one of the keys and promised himself that no matter where life took him, he would never stop playing, because the boy everyone once laughed at had found something priceless, a place in the world where he truly belonged.